Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the live stream. I hope you're all very well tonight. Let's see who we have on tonight. We have Killer. Great to have you on, Killer. Thanks for moderating. We have Misty Hill. Great to see you once again, Misty. Yorkshire and the Humber. Great to have you on. Hope you're well. Wonder where you're from. We have, let me see, J Hat. Great to see you. Niall. Great to have you on. We have You and Me. Great to see you once again, You and Me. We also have... Inconsequential, great to see you. We have Chatty Rat. Hope you're well, Chatty Rat. We have, let me see, Audrey. Great to have you on, Audrey. Hope you're well tonight. Katrina, great to see you. We also have Gene T and Mega Hairy Bum. Great to see both of you. Who else have we got? Colin, great to see you, Colin. Claire, great to see you. We also have CGM. Hope you're well tonight, CGM. Mandy, great to have you on, Mandy. Hope you're well today. We also have Tim McGreevy. Great to see you. Katrina Bryce, great to have you on. Hope you're well. Good evening to everyone. Good evening to you, Katrina. We have Tommy. Great to see you. Daniel. Who else? Mark. Great to see you. No Flinger. Great to have you on. No Flinger. Tommy, Conservator. We have another Mark. Maria, great to see you. And so many more. So, well, we're up to almost 300 already. So I want to say hello to everyone. Thanks for coming on tonight. We have a super chat from Valerie. Thank you so much, Valerio Tarantino. Hi, Max. I think number 10 will be very empty soon. Yes. It seems the rats are abandoning the ship. It's like a slow train crash, I think. Thanks so much for that super chat. It's like a slow train crash where it's not all of a sudden, but it's the aides are starting to leave. Some of the MPs have been complaining about Boris Johnson directly in the House of Commons. Even a few letters have come in to the 1922 committee. If you're not familiar, the 1922 committee will decide Boris Johnson's fate. They have to receive, I don't remember how many letters. I have to double check that, or somebody you can tell me. Is it 50 letters? Or is it something like 30 letters? I don't remember. But they have to receive a number of letters from MPs, and then that will trigger a challenge on the Prime Minister, and trigger a vote of no confidence, basically. Or they will decide, okay, the Prime Minister has to go. But it will be the 1922 committee that will decide Boris Johnson's fate, not Parliament itself. And if they say Boris Johnson, so if if we see Boris Johnson going to the 1922 committee over the next few days, then we know he's probably on the way out. But he's lasted a lot longer than many people thought he would. A lot longer than I thought he would. But it's 54. Thanks so much, guys. 54. Alexis, thanks so much for that super chat. Ciao Max, come stai? Sto molto bene, e tu? Hope you're well, thank you. How are you? So says Alexis, I'm very well. I hope you're all very well tonight as well. Minimum 54, I guess. Yes, 54 is the magic number. And it's only at something like 12 or 13 at the moment, so it's not anywhere near enough. And Vicky, thanks so much for that super chat. Great to see you on once again, Vicky. I haven't seen you in a long time. Should rename number 10 to number 2. Yes. Thanks for that super chat to both of you as well. Yes, number 10 should be changed to number 2. It's more apt. 54 letters to the 1922 committee. But it seems to be, I think a problem is that many MPs are holding back because they want somebody else, some high-profile individual to say for Boris Johnson to go. So not a backbencher, but maybe a member of the cabinet. If a member of the cabinet says, look, it's over, then the letters will flow in. Or if a high-profile MP says, yes, he has to go, and I have sent a letter to the 1922 committee, then he's finished. Because they don't want to be the one that's the first to send a letter, or to be the first high-profile MP to send a letter. So I think a lot of them are holding back because they don't want to be the one to be seen to have brought down Boris Johnson, because there's this sort of loyalty to the party that they have to maintain. They'll always look after themselves. It's not about what's good for the country, what's good for Parliament. It's about what's good for the party. And no one wants to be the one that is blamed for starting the avalanche. Thanks, guys, for those super chats. So, for example, things are getting a bit dodgy for Boris Johnson because, well, one senior figure has said this about Boris Johnson. So, Rishi Sunak's bluntness about Johnson could be a sign he has his eye on the prize, or has eye on the prize. What did Rishi Sunak say? He said, "To be honest, I wouldn't have said that." So this is in regards to the comments that Boris Johnson made about Keir Starmer defending or refusing to prosecute Jimmy Savile when he was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS. It says here, Rishi Sunak's blunt remark about Boris Johnson's comments on Keir Starmer and Jimmy Savile was the clearest indication yet that he is distancing himself from his beleaguered boss. Another person did the same. We'll get to him later. Speaking in the flag bedecked Downing Street conference room without Johnson alongside him, Sunak was attempting to set out in soothing tones a package of measures aimed at easing the pain of the cost of living crisis. But as ever in recent weeks, another crisis that facing the Prime Minister's leadership impinged on proceedings. Clada Bob, thanks, Clada Bob. Thank you so much for that super chat. Very kind of you. Less than an hour earlier, Johnson's closest aide, Mirza, had resigned, citing the Prime Minister's failure to apologise for trying to smear Starmer by falsely connecting him with the failure to prosecute Savile. I'm extremely sceptical of these people. So anyone who comes forward and says, "Oh, I resigned," so no, I think it's up to 5 now who have resigned, 4 of them in one day, and then I think one of them resigned. Another one resigned this morning. I'm skeptical of these people who have resigned. One of them here saying that she resigned because of Boris Johnson's comments about Keir Starmer and linking him to Jimmy Savile. I don't believe for a second that's the reason. Because how many horrible things has Boris Johnson said and done over the years, and now this is why you're resigning? Because he attacked Keir Starmer in this way, because he linked Keir Starmer to Jimmy Savile. I don't believe for a second that's... When Boris Johnson said, "Let the bodies pile high," that wasn't enough for this person. When Boris Johnson lied to the Queen, when he prorogued Parliament, when he lied to the people about Brexit, none of these things were enough for this person to say, "No, I'm not going to stay with Johnson." These people are realizing that we're close to the end, and I want to get out before he brings me down too. But a lot of these people are linked to, I don't remember, I think her husband works or used to work for somebody who runs The Spectator at the moment. So a lot of these people are connected in different ways. But I don't believe for a second that she abandoned Johnson because of his language or because of what he said about Keir Starmer. Pressed on whether Johnson would give a full apology for the remarks Mirza had asked, Sunak repeatedly replied it was a matter for Johnson himself. Sunak didn't say much. He didn't have to. The comments are bound to be read as by some of his colleagues as the strongest signal yet that he may believe it is now time to act. Certainly the Chancellor looks like being the front runner in any leadership race, and his handling of the cost of living crisis, cost of living squeeze, is being closely watched by backbenchers as a test of his political nous. Alexander, thanks so much for that super chat. Rishi Sunatax. Rishi Sunatax, yes. Thanks for that super chat. Yeah, I've said it. I've been saying it for months that Sunak is the next in line. He'll be the one who will replace Johnson. It could change. It depends on how this cost of living crisis is dealt with. I think he's doing it completely the wrong way, but it's not for me to decide. It's for his backbenchers. It's for the Conservative Party to decide, and its members. But if they think he's doing a good job, if they think he's the right man for the position of Prime Minister, then he'll have it. Now, who's in second place is Liz Truss, and then we also have Dominic Raab. We have a few other people, but the two front runners are Sunak, and then a distant second is Liz Truss. And Liz Truss has been, doing voice acting and preparing herself to look something like Margaret Thatcher, and she's trying to present herself as a viable candidate, but I don't really see that really happening. Richard Turner, thanks so much for that super chat. Max, if £200 loan is per household when people move out, will they not also be paying back a loan they never had? First-time buyers or renters, etc. Yeah, so what Richard is talking about here is the Chancellor is saying he's going to help people out. I mistakenly thought it was a grant, but it's actually a loan. It's not a grant, it's a loan. So he's going to give... you have to... what's terrible about this loan is that not everyone will receive it, but everyone will have to pay it back. So what's going to happen is you're going to be given... Some people will be given this £200 loan, but it will be repaid over 5 years with a type of penalty. So over the next 5 years, automatically people will have to pay an extra for £40 a year. So even if you receive the loan or not, you'll have to pay the extra £40 a year for 5 years. This is not helping people out. So you're saying, yeah, we're going to give you a loan that you have to pay back to help you pay your energy costs because prices are rising. But you'll have to pay that loan back. And even people who apply for the loan and don't get it will still have to pay the loan back, because it's going to be a across-the-board increase of £40 that has to be paid back by everyone. It's a scam. So in regards to your question, Richard, I think even if you move house, you'll still have to pay it back. Doesn't matter, because as far as I know, it will be for everyone. Everyone will have to pay it back, whether they got the loan or not. It's not a loan for everyone. It will be a loan for some, but everyone will have to pay the £40 per year. Number 3, thanks so much for that super chat. I'm sick of this system. The Chancellor playing to his audience, not serving the country as a whole. Yes. The people who he's speaking to are never really affected by these things. In the same way, if you look at the national insurance contributions, this is going to affect the poor and the working class the most. The rich, the upper class, they're not going to suffer the consequences of this. If there's something to pay, it will have almost no impact on their lives. And unfortunately, once again, the poor and the working class are the ones who will end up paying the most of their income. And he doesn't care. And he's surrounded by people who don't care. Like, how can somebody who's married to the daughter of a billionaire and worth about £150 million himself, how can he understand the idea, the concept of, in his mind, I don't know, he is incapable of him thinking, okay, this month I have to decide to either pay the heating bill or buy food. It's an impossible concept for him. But he's the one making the decisions. Katie, thanks so much for that super chat. Will voters accept billionaire Sunak given COL, given cost of living? On the surface, I would say no, but look at what happened with Boris Johnson. We knew Boris Johnson was a liar. We knew Boris Johnson was a charlatan. But people went out and voted for him anyway. People said he'll shake things up. I know he's a liar, but I'll vote for him anyway. He'll promise to get Brexit done. Unfortunately, I have a feeling that many people would vote for. Well, let me start again. There's a difference between supporters and voters. So the supporters, the Conservative Party supporters, would love to have Sunak. Whether he'd actually win elections is another thing. I don't know if he'd actually win elections, because the reason Boris Johnson won so many seats back in 2019 was in part because of his popularity. He was popular. He was famous as well. He was well known. He had been mayor of London. A lot of people don't know Rishi Sunak. Now he's relatively known, but he's not as famous as Boris Johnson, for example. So Sunak wouldn't have that. Boris Johnson, I hate to say it, is a charismatic figure. Okay, he's a bit of a joke. A lot of people voted for him in 2019 because he's not serious, because he's not your typical politician. Rishi Sunak doesn't have that. So as I said, while he's popular with the party, he may not be popular with the voters. And I think between Starmer and Sunak, I think most people would probably go with Starmer, because they know a little bit more about him. They may trust him a bit more. And while Sunak was popular when it came to the furlough scheme, I think a lot of this will be forgotten by the time the next election comes around, and he will be, I hope, associated with the cost of living, because he has the levers of power now. He can decide whether to pump money into the economy or take it out. He has the ability to fund the social safety net, but he's not doing that, of course, or he's trying to play these games, and I don't think it's going to work out for him in the end. But the electorate are difficult to predict. We would look at someone like Sunak and say, this is a guy who should not be anywhere near the levers of power. He should be nowhere near number 10. But the voters have their own opinion, unfortunately. Thanks so much for that super chat, Katie. We have 524 watching, 169 likes. Guys, remember to smash the like button. So, as Katie was saying here, it goes on to say about the cost of living crisis. So the cost of living crisis is a present danger to him, to Sunak, but the past is too. Many Tory MPs are already worried. Many Tory MPs were already less than impressed with his insistence on increasing national insurance contributions as a quid pro quo for funding Johnson's costly plan for the NHS and social care. So he said, okay, if we're going to fund the NHS and social care, well, we're going to have to take it from somewhere. And we're not going to borrow, so we're going to increase taxes. But, of course, he didn't go to taxes on the rich. He went to taxes on the poor via the national insurance contributions. And that has upset some Tory MPs, because some of them realise that many of their voters are working class people, and they're being hit by this. And they're going to see their wage packet decrease from April. And who are they going to be angry with? They're going to be angry with the government. And of course, they're going to be angry with their local MP. It was also Sunak who doggedly insisted on cutting universal credit payments, something else that's harming the poor and the working class, which had been increased by £20 a week to help the poorest families weather the pandemic. After a furious backlash, There was partial reversal at the autumn budget by reducing the taper rate at which it was withdrawn. Sunak's careful approach to the public finances is praised by colleagues keen to see the Tories win back their reputation for fiscal competence, but others regard it as politically tone deaf, as the after effects of the pandemic continue to ripple through the economy. Yes, you can't act as if business is as business as usual. You need to stimulate the economy by pumping money into it, not by raising taxes and cutting services. And that's exactly what Sunak wants to do. He wants to impose a new type of austerity. And while austerity was bad, this is even worse, because what he's doing is he's not just cutting services, but he's also raising taxes via national insurance contributions on the poor and the working class. At least even during austerity, you didn't have that. You had welfare cut, you had the social safety net trimmed, but national insurance contributions didn't rise. Caution about public finances are also appearing to be behind his decision to cushion the blow of rocketing energy prices partly with loans, which I don't think is going to work, which will ultimately have to be repaid by consumers themselves rather than the taxpayer footing the bill. So what his plan is, okay, we'll give people loans and then they pay them back. And that's our way of giving people money. But they have to pay it back. That's not helping. That's not money that's going into the economy. It's going in and then it's going to come out again. Because people will spend, if they have a bit of extra money, they're going to spend it. But then they'll have to cut back when they have to pay this money back. This is effectively a bet on energy prices coming down again in future years. If they remain high for longer than expected, the Treasury may have to extend the scheme. And there's no guarantee that prices will drop. Energy prices are rising all the time. Now, some of it is linked to China. The Chinese economy is recovering, is bouncing back after the pandemic. And there's a huge demand for gas, for example, in China. So they're driving up the price. Until their economy starts to hit some bumps, I think prices are going to continue to rise. I think we're going to see prices rising for the next, at least for this year, and maybe even the next one as well, until something changes. But I don't see anything happening at the moment, or anything in the short term. It goes on to say, polls suggest that another of Sunak's political principles, a reluctance to interfere in business, appeared to be behind his decision to avoid taxing energy companies to pay for the measures, something Labour has been calling for since the autumn. These energy companies, Shell, for example, I think they reported £14 billion in profit. Yeah, couldn't you tax those? A lot of banker bonuses, CEOs, board members of the boards of many boards of directors of many companies, they're receiving huge bonuses. We should be taxing those bonuses. But he doesn't want to do that. He has frequently restrained Johnson's free spending instinct. Polls suggest that this would be a popular approach with oil companies raking in huge profits, but it cuts against Sunak's brand of free market conservatism. He has frequently restrained Johnson's free spending instincts, believing, as he has said on in Thursday's press conference, that managing the public finances responsibly is what the public have the right to expect from his party. Yes, how can you say that while at the same time handing over £37 billion to Dido Harding? And Sunak himself writing off, what was it, £4.9 billion in fraud in regards to the pandemic. So loans, these bounce back loans that were given out to companies, a lot of the money is not coming back, so they've decided to write it off to the value of £4.9 billion. And he's trying to sell the public the idea that his party is the party of sound public financing. No, not at all. He was a banker. He will never tax them. Good point. You can't tax them. They vote Tory. Yes. Or not so much they vote, but they donate, which is more important. Much more important than voting is donating. If you can donate to your local MP, Conservative MP, of course, it's much better than voting. Voting won't get any change taking place, unfortunately. If you give a £10,000 donation to your local Tory MP, that'll open so many doors. A great way to invest. The return on investment is 100-fold. Sunak is a total banker. Writing off that money equates to a criminal act. Yes, it is. That's money that could have been spent. 4.9 billion. I think it was 4.9. Between 4.3 and 4.9. I haven't the figure in front of me, but it was somewhere in that area. That money could have been spent for hospitals. It could have been given to the NHS. Remember, they're talking about, we don't have enough money to increase NHS staff's wages. We don't have enough money. We're going to give them 1%, and then there was back and forth, and then eventually I think it came to 1.5%, 3%. There are a number of numbers bandied about. That money could have been given to them. Money could have built hospitals, hired more staff, improved equipment, resources for the NHS. No, we're going to write it all off. We're not getting it back. And thought it was 4.2. It's now 8.3 billion max. I think the 8.3 is for the PPE. So that's another problem. Chris, thanks for that comment. George Carruthers, great to see you on. Hope you're well. 350 million a week. Yes. That was the 12.8 billion. Okay. Well, how are things going in Westminster? Not directly related to this, but I think this is an interesting video to see. This is from Sam Coles of Sky News.
Working hard to make it better, cleaning up the mess. Yesterday, a late-night clear-out of key staff in Number 10 as the Prime Minister tries to press reset on his government. Today, a fifth top aide threw in the towel, policy advisor Elena Nazaransky. She followed her boss, Munira Mirza, who quit yesterday after the PM's attacks on Keir Starmer over Jimmy Savile, while Director of Public Prosecutions. Today, the Health Secretary joined the Chancellor in distancing himself from the Prime Minister.
Keir Starmer, when he was running the DUP, did a good job, and he should be respected for it. It's a tough job, and he deserves absolute respect.
The PM
Wow. So you can see these are two people who've put a bit of distance between themselves and Boris Johnson. We had Rishi Sunak, and now we've Sajid Javid. So this is not good for Boris Johnson, because these people should be on his side. Now, there are Tory MPs who are on his side. And we even had Dominic Raab try to defend what Johnson did. That was immediately after. Now I think they're seeing, okay, some of his aides have left. Cracks have begun to appear in Boris Johnson's premiership. It's a matter of days now. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Because Johnson has a knack for weathering these storms. And until recently, something I noticed, and you probably noticed it yourself, is how there will be a scandal at the weekend. Because, okay, Boris Johnson, this is it. It's over. It's going too fast for my ears. Boris Johnson, you're towards the end. Okay, this scandal is enough to end his career, and then by Monday or Tuesday it would dampen a bit, and then by Thursday or Friday he would have been over it, and then on Saturday and Sunday there would be another scandal. On Monday and Tuesday we say, okay, this is it, it's over, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, he would have weathered it again. But aides leaving is not good. Now, these will be replaced. He hasn't replaced them yet, it seems, but it does seem that there's leakage, and it's difficult to just replace people who have been with the Prime Minister for a long time. It's not, you can't just bring people in from outside and expect things just to go on as normal. Anyone who is brought in as an advisor or as an aide, they have to realize what they're getting themselves into. And I think anyone who would be joining Boris Johnson's administration at this moment is doing it just for the money. Because if he's going soon, then it's not good for your career.
Attempted to rally his troops amid the storm with an unusual source of inspiration. Quoting Rafiki from The Lion King, he told a meeting of all Downing Street staff that change is good, but not good enough for a growing number of his MPs. Another letter of no confidence. Now 13 Tory MPs are calling for Boris Johnson publicly to go, this time from Aaron Bell.
Does the Prime Minister think I'm a fool?
A critic of the PM's behaviour.
Does the Prime Minister think I'm a fool? I have to question as well, why now? Like, these people had no problem with Boris Johnson saying let the bodies pile high, no problem with him proroguing Parliament, no problem with him lying to the Queen, no problem with him lying to Parliament, lying to the public over Brexit, throwing Northern Ireland under a bus. None of these MPs had a problem with him doing that. Now they have a problem with him.
Behaviour already now says his position is untenable.
Boris Johnson hoped to get Tory MPs back on side with his clear out of number 10, but the manner of its execution and who ended up going has only served to sow more doubt. Something funny is going on. More and more Tory MPs tell me that they want Boris Johnson gone, but aren't willing personally to put in a letter of no confidence. Part of that is concern about what comes next.
I think the worry is there's no clear successor who's out there, and that is a worry for colleagues. Quite honestly, I think now's the time for the Cabinet to show some leadership, deal with the issue, and go and see the Prime Minister and tell him that the writing has been on the wall for quite some time, and we can't continue like this.
The writing has been on the wall, yes. But who's going to replace him? And I think within the party, they would like somebody who can win elections. But they're not sure that Rishi Sunak would win elections. So, yes, while they would like to have somebody like Rishi Sunak in charge, they're not sure that he would be the right person to lead them. And he has a bit of baggage at the moment now because he's not well viewed by the public when it comes to how he cut the universal credit uplift. This cost of living crisis is something that could be very difficult for him to deal with, because he would be the focus then. He would be the focus. Okay, what are you doing about it? If he became Prime Minister, he would have his own Chancellor, but I think this could be something that the Labour Party could use against him. You're not interested in looking after the public. You're a multi-millionaire. Your wife is the daughter of a billionaire. How can you understand the problems of ordinary people? And I think this could be very difficult for him to try and weather. And I'm not sure what he actually brings to the table apart from that. See, as I said before, Boris Johnson, David McGuinness, great to see you on the stream. Hope you're well. Boris Johnson, whether you like him or not, and I think most of us here don't, but he has this sort of charisma. A lot of people voted for him because he's a bit of a clown, because they thought he would shake things up. He's not your typical politician. And Rishi Sunak isn't like that. And then, of course, there is another issue that I haven't talked about. The racists. Would the racists vote for Rishi Sunak? I don't know. Would they be able to see over the racism and say, look, we'll vote for Tory because he's a Tory? I don't think they would do that. They would probably sit it out. Or they would look for another party, like the Reform Party or UKIP and this is something that could flip. This could be a real game changer, is if Nigel Farage, who's, sitting in GB News at the moment, if Nigel Farage decided to re-enter politics, it could create a nightmare, or at least a severe headache for the Conservatives, because he could be in a position where he would split the vote, or he could be in a position where he could help the party. He could run candidates for the Reform Party in Labour marginals where they could be going towards the Labour Party, or in the so-called Red Wall. So the racists would come out and they would vote for that party, and the crazies as well. So that could be a problem. But it depends on whether Farage would come back. I think Farage would do it. He loves the attention. I don't see them picking up many seats, maybe not even one seat, or maybe one seat. But that's not so much what it's about. It's about influence. And as we saw with the Brexit Party, if the Brexit Party had not run, the Conservatives could have actually had more seats, because they split the vote in some areas where the Conservatives were going to do well. But they also created problems for the Labour Party. So there were some Labour seats that were held because there was a Brexit Party candidate there. So they were held, but barely. So if there was no Brexit Party candidate there, it could have gone the other way. Maybe the racists can't be convinced to support proportional representation. Can be convinced, so they can vote for the Reform Party and Farage. Unfortunately, any proportional representation would come after, after an election. So we wouldn't see PR for until the next parliamentary session, at least, or maybe after that again. But proportional representation will not be on the ballot in the next election. I don't even think any party will run on a manifesto that will include PR. The Labour Party won't do it because it won't win them any votes. Perhaps they would support it. I don't know if they would officially. No, they're not supporting proportional representation. But if they get into power, it would benefit the Labour Party. It would benefit the country if proportional representation was brought in. If the Labour Party won a massive majority, then they should bring in proportional representation, because that's not going to happen again. They would have a majority, and then the next election, the Tories would be back in. And then the Labour Party would be out for another generation. The Labour Party haven't been in power since 2010. 2009, 2010. It's over 10 years. So you don't want to be in for a bit and then out for a long bit. And proportional representation is much more democratic than first past the post. Anyway, let's move on. I want to show you this clip from Labour MP who delivered about a wonderful speech on Boris Johnson's apology, and how sincere it was when he's, over Partygate.
He lied to Parliament. He lied to the country. He has taken the country for fools. He was at parties. His staff were packing suitcases full of alcohol, working out which spad was going to be the DJ, while people in this room were probably burying their families. And when I worked on the NHS frontline, taking iPads, when I took iPads to the bedsides of dying people, so their 3 children under 6 could say goodbye, there is absolutely no justification for the pain that they have felt that could possibly be explained away by a cheap apology, an insincere, cheap apology by the Prime Minister.
Well said. Dr. Rezana she works as a frontline doctor in the NHS, and she's a member of Parliament. And, you know, I've talked before about, you know, double jobs. MPs shouldn't have another job. I'd make the exception with her because she's somebody who actually cares. She talks about the problems facing the NHS. She works on the front line, and she's also working as an MP. Look, as I said, there could be exceptions made, but she's somebody who obviously cares. And Boris Johnson does not care. Boris Johnson has never cared. He was having his parties while people, as she said, were burying loved ones. Somebody has to call this out. And unfortunately, we're sort of moving away from the Partygate. We're moving on to, okay, how long will Boris Johnson stay there? And once he's out, we'll sort of breathe a sigh of relief. But these things will continue. The corruption regarding PPE, it'd be for something else, of course, but the corruption will continue. The cronyism will continue. The lying will continue. Just because Boris Johnson is gone doesn't mean that Rishi Sunak and others will not lie in Parliament. They know that they can because they know they will get away with it. They won't be held to account. They won't be forced to return to Parliament to correct the record. They have seen Boris Johnson set the new standard. Will they lie in the same way? No, probably not. But they will mislead the public and mislead Parliament for sure. So let's have a look about what happened with these 4 aides. So this is from yesterday, but we had another one this morning. So let's see what Sky News had to say about it.
Johnson's most senior Downing Street advisors have resigned this evening. Director of Communications Jack Doyle left just hours after Policy Chief Munira Metz quit over the Prime Minister's use of a discredited claim that the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer personally failed to prosecute Jimmy Savile. And in the last 30 minutes, 2 more senior officials have gone. They are Dan Rosenfield and Martin Reynolds. Well, our political editor, Beth Rigby, joins me now. So, Beth, I know it's a moving situation, but what can you tell us about what's going on? Is it coordinated, or are we seeing a domino effect, do you think?
Well, look, I think there's 4 different people, and I think there's probably 2 stories here. One is Munira Mirza. She is, and I should say to viewers, people won't know these people because they work behind the scenes. But, you know, losing 4 of your key members of staff in a few hours is a bombshell going off in Number 10. This is massively destabilising for the government at a time when the Prime Minister is already in very, very hot water. But to go back to who they are and what's going on, in terms of Munira Mirza, she is a key ally to Boris Johnson. She's worked with him since 2008 on and off. You can see her coming out of Downing Street there with him. She worked with him in City Hall. She then came back to be the head of policy at Downing Street when he became Prime Minister in July 2019. And she has resigned today because she says she cannot really in good conscience stay by his side, given the remarks he made about Jimmy Savile towards...
I don't believe that for a second. David McGuinness, thanks so much for that super chat. Dr. Philippa Whitford has had the piss ripped out of her in the House of Thieves, and carpetbaggers is obscene. I haven't seen that. I will check that out. Thanks so much for that super chat. I'll check that out to see what happened there. I don't know. I can't really comment on it because I haven't seen it, but I will check that out. Thanks so much for that. But this lady on the screen, like, you know, I don't believe for a second that she left because of Boris Johnson's comments about Keir Starmer. You've been with Boris. You've been an advisor for Boris Johnson for over 10 years. And this is why you left? Cut the crap.
Keir Starmer.
Well, we know her reasoning, don't we? Because she released that letter to the Spectator magazine.
She did.
I think we've got some of it here, Beth. If you want to take us through it.
Okay. If we...
Well, there it is.
Yeah,
she says, I believe it was wrong for you to imply this week that Keir Starmer was personally responsible for allowing Jimmy Savile to escape justice. There was no...
Notice how these people are all connected. So she's connected to somebody who, I think it's the head of the Spectator. So she she writes a letter. It's quoted in The Spectator. She doesn't come out and speak to the media. She didn't say to the media, I'm resigning because of this reason or what that reason. It's all through the connections that each of them have. In the same way as that it appeared that the editor, was it, of The Sun, was probably at one of Boris Johnson's parties. Probably, I'm not saying he was, but probably at one of Boris Johnson's parties. That's probably why the Sun, for example, didn't release any information about these parties until other newspapers, I think it was the Mirror, did. They were the ones who released the picture of Boris Johnson in the garden with his chief of staff, was it, or press secretary, and Dominic Cummings. The Mirror released that, but the Sun obviously, and the Telegraph and the Daily Mail, they obviously had access to this. They knew what was going on, but they sat on it. And she here, instead of actually being honest to the, speaking to the public, she speaks to the public via The Spectator.
Fair or reasonable basis for that assertion. This was not the usual cut and thrust of politics. It was an inappropriate and partisan reference to a horrendous case of child sex abuse. You tried to clarify your position today, but despite my urging, you did not apologise for the misleading impression you gave. So we can tell just from that, quite a row about that. She told him to apologise properly, and
this morning he did not. Yeah. This morning he gave a
But she asked Boris Johnson to apologise. This is Boris Johnson we're talking about. Boris Johnson does not apologise. This is why I don't believe for a second that she resigned because of what Boris Johnson did on this moment. I think she resigned because she realises her career is over. Boris Johnson's is probably over, definitely as Prime Minister. So you might as well leave before the ship completely sinks. These people are charlatans like the people they provide information to. These people are no different to Boris Johnson.
Clarification.
Once again, and I said this a long time ago, whether it's true or not, but allegedly Boris Johnson burnt a £50 note in order to get into the Bullington Club. It was one of the initiation measures or procedures. It was one of the things you had to do in order to get into the club, was to burn a £50 note in front of a homeless person. Now, what does that tell you about the type of people of that club? And what does that tell you about Boris Johnson? So, I wouldn't want to meet Boris Johnson. I'd never want to have anything to do with Boris Johnson, simply because of that. Now, whether it's true or not, would you be surprised if it was true? No. It's completely within his character. He made jokes about the bombing of Sirte in Libya, where the bodies would be all over the streets, and he said, "Oh, well, don't worry, we'll clean away the bodies before." I don't remember the rest of the quote. We made jokes about dead people in the streets of Sirte. He's made jokes about, taking it on the chin. He made jokes about letting the bodies pile high. He allegedly was involved with getting a journalist beaten up. This is the type of person we're talking about. So I don't believe for a second that she said, "Oh my God, how could you have said such a horrible thing about Keir Starmer?" About Keir Starmer. These people don't give a crap about Keir Starmer. They don't give a crap about anyone but themselves. So obviously they realised the game is up. My career is not going to improve the longer I stay with Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was rising over the last number of years. Now he's crashing. Best to get out now. Number 3, thanks so much for that super chat. We need a national unity government. We have a climate crisis to deal with together. Yes, but unfortunately that's not going to happen. I would hope I would be completely supportive of something like that, where politicians put their politics aside and say, okay, we need to work together, like in World War II. When the two sides came together and said, we need to work together to deal with this crisis, war that's taking place. We're not going to be partisan. But unfortunately, even climate change has become politicized. And you have people on the right either denying that it exists or completely against any measures to mitigate the damage of climate change. Thanks for that super chat, number 3. But I agree with you. But unfortunately, we're very far away from having a government of national unity. Because you need adults on both sides. There are some Tories who would be willing to do something, who care about the environment, who care about dealing with climate change. And they would be willing to work with the Labour Party. But a government of national unity, I don't see that happening, unfortunately.
And what she clearly wanted was an explicit apology. And with that, she has left Downing Street. And that was a genuine shock, because she has been such a loyal ally. So that's Munira and her position. We then tonight had the Director of Communications, Jack Doyle, resigning, and in the past few minutes, the two most senior figures in Number 10, Dan Rosenfeld, the Chief of Staff, and Martin Reynolds, the Private Principal Secretary. That's effectively the most senior official advising the Prime Minister. He is the man that sent the Bring Your Own Booze email around to staff. Now, all three of these gentlemen will no doubt be implicated in the Sue Gray full report when it comes out, because they have been publicly linked to some of the events.
That's interesting. So, did they resign or were they pushed out? It could be the case that they resigned to protect Boris Johnson, because if they are no longer members of or working for the government, then anything they say would remain as any fines or any problems they'd have with the law would be between the law and them, and would not be between the law, the Metropolitan Police, yes, them, and the government, because they're no longer on the payroll. They're no longer employees of the government. So Boris Johnson's government, in a sense, could distance himself and the government from these aides.
That she is investigating. So there is clearly a question, Dermot, were all three of these heads go into role when the truth outs around the party? And there have been expectations here saying all three of them will have to step down from their jobs. But the manner in which this is happening is uncontrolled. You would expect, the Prime Minister said on Monday, I'm going to have to shake up my top team, I will come and bring you the news. What you have instead is a series of resignations into the evening on a Thursday.
And it doesn't look as if the Prime Minister is in control of it, although he instantly replaced, didn't he, Munira Mirza? He's got a new policy chief in Andrew Griffith, an MP. An
MP, and actually who formerly was a very senior manager at Sky. Mm-hmm. He has his sort of parliamentary aide. He's made Andrew his policy advisor. The statement, which if you forgive me, I will pull up on my phone here. This is the statement from Downing Street about Dan Rosenfeld and Martin Reynolds, both offering their resignations, the Prime Minister accepting this, thanking them for their significant contribution to Number 10. It says they will continue in their roles while successors are appointed, and recruitment for both posts is underway. Now, it might be that the Prime Minister tries to present this and his sort of inner circle as the beginnings of that shake-up and that clear-out of Downing Street. But the manner in which it is happening suggests the Prime Minister that is not in control. Resignations coming out of the blue, very destabilising.
What's interesting here is that he's appointing a member of Parliament. And in a way, like if he put members of Parliament into, is this the party taking over? Because Boris Johnson can fire members of, aides or supporters within government, But it'd be more difficult for him to fire members of parliament. So who is doing the hiring here? Is it Boris Johnson or is it the party? Have the party got on the phone to him and said, you need to put this person here in charge, a member of the party, and you're not going to be able to fire this person. We'll clean house and we'll put our people in charge working for you. So we have control over the situation. That could be what's happening here. But that's not good for Boris Johnson because he won't be able to control these people. He was able to control these people before. Yes, they were his aides. They would provide him advice. They would make suggestions for him on what to do. But he would control them. If there are MPs being put in place, the party will control the MPs, not Boris Johnson.
And I think there's also another question in all of this, Dermot. If you are looking into number 10, if you are a business leader or you have a successful career in other parts of government, are you going to want to go into number 10 and work with this current administration, given what is happening there currently and the chaos that this operation is in? And as someone that is outside looking in but deals with these people in my job, I'm looking at going, well, who do I go to? Who do I ask questions of? It really feels like the ship is being deserted at the moment and the Prime Minister has to try and get a grip, but it feels very, very, very unstable.
And this is very important. This is something that we don't normally see. There's a huge amount of things that happen behind the scenes, especially with the media. So, senior journalists go to certain aides, people within number 10, to get scoops, to get stories, to get to build connections in order to be able to leak information or to be able to get a feeling, to be a conduit between the government and the people. Now, that can be a good conduit or it can be a terrible conduit. But now that connection has been broken, well, the journalists go, okay, then who are we supposed to speak to? How are we supposed to interact with number 10? Boris Johnson has cut the cable, in a sense, by firing these people. So there's so many things that we imagine that it's all quite linear, that information is delivered to the journalists directly, but it doesn't always work like that. Most of the time it doesn't work like that. A lot of people, senior people in government, will provide information to journalists through certain channels, but those channels are now being closed, being cut off, and the media are trying to understand, okay, who do we speak to now? It's not just through press conferences. A lot of the information comes through senior civil servants or people within government who are trying to get information out. I think there's an attempt to close that off. If sponsors go, will the Conservatory close? Will the Conservative Party close down? If the sponsor, that's a big problem. If the donors say this is no longer a good investment, then they'll stop investing in the Conservative Party. Until recently, Conservative Party's return on investment was amazing, better than any stock exchange. But now with Boris Johnson probably on his way out, there's going to be a bit of turmoil, bit of uncertainty, and nobody wants that, especially if you're a donor, because then who do you donate to? So guys, we're about halfway through the stream, so I want to take a little break. We'll have a comedy moment, and then I'll see you again in just a jiffy, and we'll continue with the serious stuff. Hope you enjoy this.
I want to read the definition of scurrilous. Scurrilous means making or spreading scandalous claims about someone with the intention of damaging their reputation. Our Prime Minister did that, according to his closest advisor.
Well, look, let's first recognise the actual case here. The Jimmy Savile case was incredibly serious. But equally, Boris Johnson was using one of his funny man quips as part of the cut and thrust of politics. And also he was making a wider comment about the DPP, which he clarified later by using different words than he used at the time.
So it was okay for him to say it. Would you have said it?
Well, Nagra, I'm at home recovering from COVID after sitting too close to Liz Truss because she came in without her mask and didn't get tested before going into Parliament. So, you know, that's what I'm concerned about. I'm joking. Me and Liz are friends. It's just, you know, I missed a lot of things this week.
Were his words scurrilous?
Well, Naga, I believe earlier you said the dictionary definition of scurrilous. Well, another definition is humorously insulting. It's true. You can look it up. I looked it up before I spoke to you. And was it humorously insulting? Well, maybe not if you don't like sexual abuse cases being used for political points. But that's the Labour front bench for you. You know, a lot of us did laugh.
Being described as Boris Johnson being the captain of a ship, throwing crew overboard to save himself. Is that accurate?
Well, look, I don't recognise that description. The PM promised changes to the Number 10 operation earlier this week, and I personally am glad to see him delivering. You know, he's clearing the decks.
He didn't clear the decks. They left.
Well, no, Naga, he is. He is.
Yeah, these were resignations. They weren't Boris Johnson's changes.
Well, no, Naga, they resigned, and Boris Johnson accepted their resignation. Yeah, his changes. There's a lot of us here standing by our Prime Minister. Okay, he delivered Brexit, regardless of what kind of state it's in, and he got us through COVID, letting off steam a bit as he did so. You know, Naga, this rat isn't going anywhere.
This rat isn't going anywhere. So many people think it's real. So many people think this is... I think Rosie's done such a wonderful job. People can't tell whether it's real or not. And that's true comedy. So guys, you're probably here for Brexit. And of course, we're going to talk about Brexit. The DUP. Oh, I love the DUP. The DUP love shooting themselves in the foot. And they seem to be doing it on a daily basis almost. So recently what the DUP did was they said, okay, we're going to stop checks taking place on goods coming from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. We're going to instruct the ports not to carry out these checks. And the ports continue to carry out the checks. So then the DUP said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to bring down the Northern Ireland Assembly by having the First Minister of Northern Ireland resign. So he's done that. I think that happened either today or last night. The First Minister has resigned. So Northern Ireland is without its executive at the moment. And some work will continue, but what's probably going to happen is the elections are going to take place, but they may be brought forward. And that's probably not going to help the DUP. But it says here, Brexit checks on food entering Northern Ireland to continue. So Belfast High Court rules checks on goods entering from Great Britain must continue pending review. So the DUP, took some legal advice. Where did they take the legal advice from? I don't know. Maybe it was, they had a look online for some, very cheap lawyer. So it said, whoever's the cheapest will go with him or her. And, this is the result. It says here, Brexit checks on food and farm products entering Northern Ireland from Great Britain must continue pending a judicial review of the order made by Stormon's Agricultural Minister Edwin Poots. The High Court in Belfast has ruled. Mr. Justice Colton said he was suspending the order or the instruction given by the Minister of Agriculture until the further order of this court. So Edwin Poots issued an order to stop the checks taking place, and a judge overruled him. At the same time, he granted leave for an application for judicial reviews against the minister's decision. So he hasn't just said, okay, we're going to put it on ice for a moment and then we'll come back to it. No, well, if somebody wants to challenge it, they can do that as well. There shouldn't be any confusion hanging over those in the civil service. So I'm persuaded this is a case where there should be interim relief. I therefore make the order to suspend the instruction given by the Minister for Agriculture until further order of this court. Poots took the unilateral decision to order officials to halt all checks on Wednesday after taking legal advice from the former Attorney General John Larkin. You would imagine Attorney General would understand the law, but obviously he didn't. However, emerged during the hearing that these checks were due to continue until noon next Monday. Colton made no comment on whether Puig's move was lawful or not, but said the issue was important enough to proceed to judicial review. His ruling means the Brexit checks will continue until at least the 7th of March, when the next hearing on the matter will take place. So the DUP once again thinking, oh, we found a way to undermine the protocol, and then they lose again. They also try to take a case to the High Court in Belfast, saying that the Northern Ireland Protocol undermined the Act of Union 1800. And it was thrown out by a judge as well. My good friend Ben Habib was involved in that. It transpired that a similar case was already pending for the date after an anonymous individual launched a legal challenge against Puig's predecessor, Gordon Lyons. Kieran O'Hare of the law practice McIver Farrell, which is acting for the anonymous member of the public, said the case was a matter of urgency as civil servants charged with the orders need clarity. The decision by Puig to halt the checks was part of a wider DUP protest against the Brexit checks, which also led to the First Minister Paul Givan resigning from his post at Stormont. The DUP are doing everything they can to try and stop the protocol, to try and stop checks taking place, taking legal advice from people who should know better, the Attorney General, the former Attorney General. You would imagine the Attorney General would actually understand the law, but obviously he gave bad advice to Edwin Puig because the judge said, no, we're going to have to review the case, or we're going to have to review whether this is lawful or not. But once again, the DUP putting their foot in it.
A warning, this report from our senior Ireland correspondent David Blevins does contain some flash photography.
The goods from Great Britain were still rolling in, but Northern Ireland's devolved government was already on its way out. The DUP Agriculture Minister had already halted Brexit checks, but then the DUP First Minister resigned.
Today marks the end of what has been the privilege of my lifetime.
Their party leader said the Northern Ireland Protocol had left them with no option.
We've had enough of being told we must stand by previous agreements. Yet the same people who tell us this have destroyed a core pillar at the heart of the Belfast Agreement, the need for cross-community support.
There is cross-community support through the Assembly. You can't just say because the DUP don't like something, then it has to end. That's not how it works.
In the absence of a functioning executive, an early election must be called and the people must have their say.
The border between Northern Ireland and the Republic runs through Carlingford Lough. Checks here would be catastrophic for local fishermen. Brian's son only joined the family business because the EU and British government had reached agreement.
I honestly thought that everything was sorted. It was a breathed sigh of relief. I'm 6th generation, my oldest son, 21, he's 7th generation. And he left school, and I let him leave school. He's going to go on to be a physio, and I let him leave school on the strength of the protocol.
But the alternative has been contentious. A border in the Irish Sea fuelling loyalist fears over Northern Ireland's place in the UK. Joel Keyes hit the headlines when he appeared to warn of more violence, but he says his community is misunderstood.
There seems to be a habit of kind of thinking that all unionists or all loyalists are just crazy hooligans who run about and screaming about anything that offends their sense of red, white and blue, but that's not really how it works. But if you take my concerns, I want to feel respected, and I want my identity to feel respected.
But the protocol does not undermine your identity. The protocol is about goods moving from Great Britain into Northern Ireland. Sean, thanks so much for that super chat. DUP true colours finally revealed. Pure hatred of everything Catholic. I agree with you, Sean, and it's not just everything Catholic, but there's a deep hatred the DUP have for everything Irish, but also everything European. The DUP's hatred of the EU and Ireland is stronger than any love for the Union. Just because, and how can I stand by that? Because they supported Brexit. They were told Brexit would undermine the Union, and they said, we don't care. We want our Brexit. And now they're complaining that the protocol is undermining the Union. But if there was no if there was no Brexit, there would be no protocol. So they can't turn around and say this is undermining the Union. That's what you voted for. That's what you wanted. That's what you campaigned for. The DUP were the loudest pro-Brexit voice in Northern Ireland. And now they're complaining about the consequences. But getting back to this young man, your identity is not under threat. And I've said this before, and I probably did a response to this young man before. I have a lot of respect for him, okay? But his position is completely unfounded. My identity is irrelevant. Sorry, my location is irrelevant to my identity. And I think I can speak for many people here. There are Irish people living in Australia. There are English people living in America. There are Japanese people living in Spain. Their identity is not affected by the location of where they are. And even if it was a case of a united Ireland, this young man's identity, how would it be affected whether there's a flag flying over the Belfast City Hall, and what colour that flag is? How is his identity? Because his identity is what he makes it himself. Identity is not something injected into you. Identity is not something forced upon you. You create your own identity. You can adapt it. You can take bits, you can leave out bits. Yes, part of your identity comes from generations before you. But you are... for me, it's difficult for somebody to look at somebody and say, I can't have my own identity. I can only have what other people say I am. No. Make your own identity. But we're not even talking about Northern Ireland being part of a united Ireland. We're just talking here about the protocol, which is about goods, not about people. It's about, even Ian Paisley Sr. said, he said, our cows may be Irish, but our passports will be British. So it's like, what he meant by that was that the land will be Irish. The animals moving from across the border will be always the same. But us, ourselves, are what we are.
In my own country.
The EU says Brexit checks are enshrined in international law. The Prime Minister disagrees.
If you look at the protocol, which I'm sure you have studied in detail, there's plenty about...
Maybe the journalist actually studied the protocol. Boris Johnson didn't.
Uninterrupted east-west trade. It's crazy to have checks on goods that are basically circulating within the...
I've already responded to this, but it's just so insane. Like, it's crazy. Yeah, like who would sign such a thing, Boris Johnson? Who would sell such a thing to the British public as an oven-ready deal? I wonder who would do such a stupid thing.
A single market of the United Kingdom.
The problem for the Prime Minister is that this is not really about trade, it's about politics. It's just 3 months to the next Northern Ireland Assembly election, and with no end in sight to the EU-UK negotiations on the protocol, Brexit's going to dominate the campaign. Brexit didn't just raise the question of checks, it raised the age-old question of where Northern Ireland's political future lies. David Blevins, Sky News, in Belfast.
Sadly, something that should not be a problem has become a problem because certain people want it to be a problem. Because businesses in Northern Ireland want stability. They understood that Brexit would create instability. The protocol reintroduced stability, a certain level of stability, and businesses in Northern Ireland are happy with what the protocol is doing. They're not they're not saying it's perfect, it's far from perfect, but it provides stability. And that's what businesses need. And if businesses can, if you're running a business and there's stability, and you can apply this to everywhere. For example, why Why are certain businesses not setting up in Syria or in Lebanon or in Yemen or in some countries in South America? Because they lack political stability. If there is stability, then businesses will see, okay, we can set up there, we can create an industry there, we can hire people. There are, of course, there are uncertainties, but you want to reduce the uncertainties as much as possible. And you don't want politicians going out and saying, we're going to destroy everything that's around us because of some political thing. And once again, as they said here, the issue is not about trade, it's about politics. And you have these idiots like the DUP who do not care about the public, they don't care about businesses in Northern Ireland, and they're happy to see uncertainty because it serves them politically. Because the DUP need people to be angry. Because angry people, what do? They come out and vote. And they'll vote for the people who they think are angry as well. If you're, that's why sometimes I have to say to Keir Starmer, he needs to appear more angry. It shouldn't be fake. It should be real anger. Because if Keir Starmer comes out and starts shouting at Boris Johnson or the Tories for the cost of living crisis, ordinary people will listen to that and they'll say, yes, I'm angry too. Why are there so many food banks? Why are we paying more and more for energy? Why do we have to decide? Why is it that we have to decide in 2022 between eating and heating? How is it possible that the Chancellor of the Exchequer is worth £150 million, is married to the daughter of a billionaire? How is that acceptable? How can we look at that and say, yes, that's okay with me? That guy can understand the problems of ordinary people. That's what the Labour Party need to be doing. They need to be more angry. Lisa Nandy comes across as angry. I think we should hear more from her. Anyway, let's move on. Regarding... Yes, no, I wanted to share with you this story. Bank of England boss criticised for asking workers not to demand pay rise. The Bank of England, the governor of the Bank of England earns, yes, it actually says his salary here. I'll read that in a moment. But it says here, the governor of the Bank of England has come under fire from unions and earned a rebuke from number 10 Downing Street for suggesting workers should not ask for big pay rises to help control inflation. Talk about reading the room or being tone deaf. Not reading the room, the case may be. The idea that you would say, look, you shouldn't be asking for a pay rise because inflation is a problem. People, you have a guy, look, I'll just go to his salary so you can understand. Billy was paid $575,538, including pension, in his first year as the bank's governor from March 2020, more than 18 times the UK's average for a full-time employee. Now, I understand, look, he has a very senior position, probably for many central bankers, that's probably not a huge amount of money. 18 times the average, the UK average. Look, he should say something like, we need to deal with inflation, okay, but this is my responsibility. It's not the responsibility of the public. Okay? To say that the public need to deal with inflation is a stupid thing to say, because they don't have control over inflation. You do. You're able to increase interest rates. You're able to reduce interest rates. You're able to put pressure on the government to do X, Y, or Z. You can advise the government to say, look, you should do this, you should do that. He's supposed to be independent, okay, but he has a huge amount of power. He, in a sense, has almost as much power as the Chancellor. So he shouldn't be telling members of the public, you need to do your bit. No, it doesn't work like that. It's not like we're fighting the pandemic, okay? This is the monetary system. Anyway, it says here, Andrew Bailey said that he wanted to see quite clear restraint in the annual wage bargaining process between staff and their employers to help prevent an upward spiral taking hold. People are not able to pay their bills. People are not able to feed their families. Many people who are working are going to food banks, and he's saying, don't ask for more money. However, his comments drew a furious response from union leaders as households faced the worst hit to their living standards in 3 decades as soaring energy prices cause inflation to outstrip wage growth. Sharon Graham, the General Secretary of Unite, said workers did not cause Britain's cost of living crisis and should not be asked to pay for it. Why is it every time there is a crisis, rich men ask ordinary people to pay for it? She said. Yes, I agree 100%. You know, during austerity, the Tory Prime Minister David Cameron said, we're all in it together. Yes, no, we're not. Some of it are in it. We're not all equal. Some are more equal than others. Vicky, thanks so much for that super chat. I'll stop asking for a pay rise when I get the salary and bonus he does. Yes. Look, I think, you know, this is his salary. Of course, he's earning a lot more money than this. I'm pretty sure he has property, or he has investments, or he has money coming in from, this is not his income. This is how much he's paid by the central bank, by the Bank of England. So I imagine it's maybe 3 or 4 times this. I'm pretty sure he's not just on this amount of money. Thanks for that super chat. Enough is enough. We will be demanding that employers who can pay, do pay. Let's be clear, pay restraint is nothing more than a call for a national pay cut. Very good. Yes, by telling people don't ask for more money, it's a pay cut. Because if inflation, which is officially running at 7.2%, it's obviously a lot more than that. But if it's running at 7.2% and people's wages are not going up by 7.2%, then they're losing money. It's a pay cut. Because if you're able to buy something for £100 this year, and then next year it's £107, but your wages didn't go up, then you're poorer. It doesn't matter how much money you're earning, you're still poorer if it doesn't go up. It goes on to say, so Bailey, 18 times the average salary of a full-time employee. In a sign of a rift between the government and the bank, the Prime Minister's official spokesperson said pay restraint was not something he was calling for. We obviously want a high wage, high growth economy. We want people's wages to increase, he said. We recognise the challenge of the economic picture, which Andrew Bailey set out. But obviously it's not up for the government to set wages or advise on a strategy, direction or management of private companies. Cahill, thanks so much for that super chat. Any chance Brexit might have contributed to inflation? Yes, of course. We've seen how certain wages have increased. For example, when it came to HGV drivers. Now, those wages, by paying those drivers more, that cost is passed on to someone else, and that finds itself that increase finds its way into the system. So that's in part of it also because of cost of goods. It's more difficult to import these goods, so you have to pay more. This is driving up inflation as well. So certain goods have to, for example, storage prices have gone up as well because it's more difficult to store it. There's not enough storage available. That's driving up prices as well. When there's a shortage, it drives up prices. When there's a glut, it drives down prices. And because, for example, there's a shortage of heavy goods vehicle drivers, there's a shortage of goods themselves, that's driving up prices. For example, and you can see it from the beginning. So, for example, raw materials like timber and certain chemicals for making products, they have gone up massively. And then that cost trickles all the way down to the products that you buy in the supermarket. For example, timber, building houses, the price has doubled, I think, over the last 12 months. So if that, if you want to build a shop or a business or a factory, it's going to cost you double. So then you have to charge more for your products, and then eventually the consumer will end up paying more. Antochi Martha, thanks so much for that super chat. The Tories are transforming. Whoops, it's moving a little bit fast tonight. The Tories are transforming the UK into a purgatory, purging all the money from regular citizens' pockets. Yes, taking. And what's disgusting us, thanks so much for that super chat. What's disgusting about the way Rishi Sunak is doing it in this way is he's giving a loan, and then you have to pay it back whether you receive the loan or not. And it's been given to people as a loan in a way that he's describing it as support. But it's not real support because it's not a grant. This should be a grant, saying, okay, wages are stagnant, but prices are rising. We need to help people out. And you know, UBI would go some way to help people out. Would it resolve all the problems? Of course not. But it would go some way. And I'll come back to this story in a moment because I wanted to talk about something that somebody thought I had it up here. No, damn it! I thought I had it. Okay. No, I think it was Jack. I forget her surname. She was talking. She's one of these people who have been looking at the cost of living over the last number of years. Maybe if you remember her surname in the chat, Jack. I think she was on James O'Brien's show a couple of weeks ago. Brexitflation, the freckled pony. Thanks so much for that super chat. Brexit inflation. A good new catchphrase. That should be. We should get that trending on Twitter. But Jack, let me see if you guys say her surname. I don't remember. Anyway, she was. She talked about how there should be. He said UBI. Jack Malone, yes, Jack Monroe. Jack Monroe said how there needs to be a universal basic income or a universal living wage. And I agree 100% with her on that because people are struggling at the moment. People are going to food banks. People are relying on charity. If you have to decide in 2021 that between feeding my family and heating my home, then there's something wrong. Something has broken. And every time Boris Johnson or Jacob Rees-Mogg or Rishi Sunak talk about we're the fastest growing nation in the G7, then I would turn around and I'd say, then why are there so many food banks? Can the Prime Minister or the Minister or the Chancellor or whoever, can they tell me why there are so many food banks? If we're the fastest growing nation in the G7, then there shouldn't be any food banks. Everyone should be better off. But the number of people relying on food banks increases. It's not going down, it's actually increasing. And it's been increasing before the pandemic, before they get to turn around and say, it's because of the pandemic. No, before the pandemic. So how can we have the fastest growing economy, but also a growing number of people relying on food banks? There should be no food banks in the country, because as soon, and I said this before, I'm not just picking on the UK, no country should have food banks, because a food bank exists when there is a failure in the system. And if there's a failure in the system for a year, then we try to fix that failure. But if the number of food banks continue to increase, then it's not a failure in the system, it's by design. UBI implies the end of other redistribution means. That might be risky for some populations. Also, it already exists. It's at least in France and in the RSA. With the RSA, and maybe Spain, but I don't know enough to be sure. We have the slowest growth of food banks in Europe. Would be their lie. Yeah, no, the Tories would know. But the problem with some Tories Jacob Rees-Mogg, for example, he finds food banks uplifting. So it's good that maybe members of the government are disagreeing with the governor of the Bank of England. Anyway, as the bank raised interest rates by 0.5% on Thursday to tackle inflation, it warned household disposable income were on track to shrink by 2% this year. So just look at this for a moment. The central bank, or the Bank of England, has raised interest rates by 0.5%, okay? But at the same time, disposable incomes are shrinking by 2%. So he's going to make it more expensive. So he's actually taking money out of the economy because he's making it more expensive to loan. Okay, so that's a way of taking money out. But what you normally take money out of the economy when the economy is overheating. So when things are going really well, you increase interest rates. I remember this from my business studies school, lessons at school. I'm not an economist, okay, but I studied a little bit at high school. And I remember, very simple. Most of you probably know it even better than I do. But when the economy is doing well, the central bank, or the Bank of England, increases interest rates to bring down, to slow down the economy because it's going too fast. But the economy is not expanding. People's wages are not increasing. People's disposable incomes are decreasing. So by right, he should be decreasing interest rates, not increasing them. Because there's a type of... but he's dealing with inflation. But this is not inflation due to wage increases. This is inflation due to external issues. For example, energy prices, something that the government don't have control over. This doesn't normally happen. This happened back in the 1970s, for example. So when the oil prices increased, the government had no control over that. And you had inflation running in double figures. Now, some people I've spoken to believe that inflation is probably in double figures. It's not 7.2%. The number they're using is much lower than the real number. The official number is much lower than the real number. They're using a dodgy measuring tape. So I'll just read this one again. So as the bank raised interest rates to 0.5% on Thursday to tackle inflation, it warned household disposable incomes were on track to shrink by 2% this year, the biggest fall since comparable records began in 1990. It comes after the worst decade of average pay growth since the Napoleonic Wars, which with inflation adjusted pay just below the pre-2008 financial crisis peak. So prices have increased, but people's wages have not really increased since 2008. The governor's call for restraint comes after Johnson's last autumn criticised companies' bosses for wanting cheaper workers from the EU. Once again, somebody was, I forgot, sorry, who was asking, is this because of Brexit? There we have it. Brexit was about kicking out all of these foreigners. Now we have not enough people to do the work, so we have to pay them more. So this is driving up the wages. But it's not driving up wages so much at the end, it's driving them up at the beginning. So it's more expensive at the beginning of the process, so it eventually becomes more expensive also along the supply chain and along the chain of production and delivery. Bailey said restricting wage growth was vital for keeping a grip on inflation, telling the BBC's Today programme it would help stabilise the economy after the turbulence of COVID-19. I'm not saying nobody gets a pay rise, don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is we need to see some restraint in pay bargaining, otherwise it will get out of control. But people need more money because the money they have in their pocket is not getting them enough. People are seeing a pay cut in reality. So if they ask for a pay rise, it's in order to stay at the level of inflation or slightly above it, but not, it's not, if inflation was at 5%, And he was saying, look, we need to keep wage growth at about 5%. That's okay, because people will remain they'll be at break even. But if inflation is at 7.2% and you're saying people shouldn't actually get a pay rise, then they're getting a pay cut of 7.2%. Union leaders said Bailey's comments were a sick joke as workers faced intense pressure to heat their homes and keep food on the table. Gary Smith, the General Secretary of GMB, GMB trade union, said the nerve of Mr. Bailey was scarcely credible, telling the hard-working people who carried this country through the pandemic they don't deserve a pay rise is outrageous. Despite urging restraint over pay, Bailey said it would take at least 2 years for high rates of inflation to stabilise. It's going to be a very difficult period. It's going to be a difficult period ahead, I readily admit, because we're already seeing and we're going to see a reduction in real income. We're going to start coming out of it in 2023, and 2 years from now we expect to be back on a sort of stable, certainly inflation position. Economists question whether workers have sufficient bargaining power to demand bumper pay rises despite low rates of unemployment after a steady decline in trade union membership since the 1970s, when big pay settlement contributed to high rates of inflation. I think this is important to remember, that trade unions now have very little power. The trade unions that do exist represent generally public sector workers, not the private sector. There are some operate in the private sector, but it's mainly public sector workers. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but that seems to be the case. And the people who need bargaining, pay bargaining the most, are nowhere near a trade union. Talking about people on 0-hour contracts, for example, something that, of course, Tories want to expand the use of. One of the things the Brexiteers, those supporting Brexit, and I'm talking about the think tanks and the right-wing zealots, but also the business people who supported Brexit, they want 0-hour contracts expanded. They want it everywhere because it makes life much easier for them. They have less taxes to pay. They don't have to pay contributions, and they have the flexibility. They have a workforce that is can you even use the word flexible, because they can be called in to do a job, and then if there's no work for them, they're sent home without pay. That would be impossible if there was a trade union involved in these businesses. Kate Bell, the head of economics at the TUC, said inflation was being driven by high energy costs, not pay demands. Working people need a pay rise now, and the best way to get one is to join a union, she said. Threadneedle Street said on Thursday that inflation could peak at about 7.25% in April, but from the current up from the current 30-year high of 5.4%. The central bank is set a mandate by the government to target inflation at 2%. So what you have is the government saying don't go over 2%. The central bank, the Bank of England, is saying we're currently at 5.4 and we're heading towards 7.25. That's if things like energy prices remain stable. But if energy prices continue to rise, 7.25% is not where we're going to be by the end of the year. It's going to be much higher than that. Energy prices are probably the core problem here, because when they go up, they affect so many industries. They affect pretty much every industry. Let me read some of your comments because I was blabbing away there. I see what the problem here is, by the way. The rich don't care about a little bit UBI shopping money. And the bosses get bonuses out of the cash saved from not paying proper wages. Yes. Even Henry Ford, a right-wing tycoon, think Trump with actual brains, said, if if I don't pay my workers decent wages, how will they be able to buy cars, buy the cars in my factory produce? Yes. No, because if people's wages go up, they buy more things. But unfortunately, the Conservative Party in particular don't want a thriving middle class or a thriving working class. They want a separation taking place because it's ideological. It's not economic. It's ideological. They need they need to have, and I think there are a lot of things feeding into this. There are the business owners who want workers who are desperate. We saw it when it came to getting people back into city centres, trying to stop people from working from home. Do you remember that? Do you remember when, I think it was Michael Gove, was it Michael Gove or was another Tory MP? Maybe it was someone like Michael Gove, I think it was, who was saying, we need to get people back into we need to stop people from working from home. Rishi Sunak was working around the clock to close loopholes in the law that would allow people to work from home. Why are they so against people working from home? Because certain businesses are going to lose out if people work from home. I'm not talking about public transport. I'm talking about all of the businesses that rent in city centres. Renting in the city centre is extremely lucrative. If you have a business, if you have property in the centre of London and you're renting it out, you make a huge amount of money. Okay, and if those businesses are empty, then you're going to have to reduce your rents or go without rent altogether. And a lot of these rents are not just private companies that are renting out. These are large corporations. They have money invested all over the world. And if they see money dropping in London, for example, they get on the phone to who? They get onto the phone to the politicians and say, what the heck is going on here? Do something about it. We need people getting back into the business. Yes, but we have a pandemic. I don't give a crap about the pandemic. Those workers need to get into the city centre. We need to convince more people to rent property in our, to maintain our portfolios. That's what it's about. They don't care about the public. They don't care about the country. These people, many of the ones who own this property don't live in the UK. Okay. Tories only care about the City of London. One person's rent is another person's income. Leo Varadkar. I think he said it unironically. Yes, but it's true. Like one person's rent is another. So some people, there's the individual, but there's also there are companies who rely on all of this rent. And if this rent isn't coming in, they're in serious trouble. So they don't want the poor getting richer, because then the poor will start buying these properties. The poor... But I think... So this is one aspect about keeping the poor down, because we need cheap labour. We need people working, doing the work that we don't want to do ourselves. But I think there's also the sort of upper class, aristocratic difference between the Tories and everyone else. They feel themselves as better. They went to private school. What is it? Something like 7 or 8% of the population went to private school, but 90% of the House of members of Parliament in the House of Commons were privately educated. Just think about that for a moment. Only 7 or 8% of the population have attended private education, have benefited from private education. But a vast majority of MPs were privately educated. So who are they going to look after? They're going to look after their own. Like, I agree 100% with Graham Hughes on this. Private education is a huge problem in the UK. It creates an underclass. And the underclass is everyone who didn't go to private school. And private school allows you, it gives you access to things that no matter how much you work, if you have not attended a private school, it doesn't matter what you do, you will never be able to get to the same level as them. Now, Never is maybe an overstatement, is an exaggeration. A few people do get through. One being, for example, John Major. And some people believe that Jacob Rees-Mogg despised John Major because he didn't go to private school. His father was a bus driver, I think. But John Major himself didn't go to private school. And look at John Major today. I don't agree with his politics, but he was an extremely articulate individual, proving that private education is not all it's cut out to be. And then on the other end of the scale, you have Dominic Raab. Dominic Raab went to private school, and Dominic Raab doesn't know where Dover is on a map. Number 3, AI means we need UBI, and that's that's something else. Yes, when it comes to UBI, a lot of jobs are going to be outsourced to AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, computers, software, either strong AI or weak AI, different forms of AI, and yes. And it's not just about manual jobs. It's not just about repetitive jobs. It's also skilled jobs. There was a video I saw recently where they had a lawyer check a document, and they had an AI lawyer check a document. And the real lawyer, the human lawyer, made some mistakes, while the AI lawyer made no mistakes and was able to process the information much faster. That would be a lawyer. Not a lawyer's complete job, but the proofreading of a contract, that would be outsourced to an AI, to a program. So, it's not just people at the bottom end of the economic scale that would be replaced by robots or AI, but also different levels as well. Etonians know bugger all about science. Yes. So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream, but I wanted to show you this clip, which is very interesting. So Sarah Jones, Labour MP, called a point of order over Boris Johnson and his lies. And I think this is something good. This is something positive. More and more MPs are standing up and calling points of order in the House of Commons, saying, look, the Prime Minister misled Parliament. He should correct the record.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a point of order, I rise to make a point in relation to comments made by the Prime Minister on Monday, who I believe inadvertently misled the House. On Monday, the 31st of January, the Prime Minister said in this place, "We have been cutting crime by 14%. And again on Monday, he said, "What we are actually doing is cutting crime by 14%. The Prime Minister was referring to the national crime statistics, which were published on the 27th of January. In a letter to the Right Honourable Member for Orkney and Shetland, the UK Statistics Authority said the Prime Minister referred to a 14% reduction in crime, which is the change between the year ending September 2019 and the year ending September 2021. This figure excludes fraud and computer misuse, though the Prime Minister did not make that clear. If fraud and computer misuse are counted in total crime as they should be, total crime in fact increased by 14% between the year ending September 2019 and the year ending September 2021. Mr. Speaker, the Ministerial Code states it's of paramount importance that ministers give accurate and truthful information to Parliament, correcting any inadvertent error at the earliest opportunity. It seems clear, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister inadvertently misled the House, and I would be grateful for your advice on how he might, at the earliest opportunity, correct the record.
Can I first of all say I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving notice of her point of order. She may be aware that the issue was raised by the member for North East Fife yesterday. I repeat what was said in response to that point of order. Although the Chair is not responsible for the content of contributions made by ministers, I am sure concern was heard on the Treasury bench. If an error has been made in this instance, I am sure the Minister will seek to correct it as quickly as possible. She will no doubt also be aware of paragraph 8.15 of the Ministerial Code, which deals with the use of statistics. I am sure she will find ways of pursuing this issue, should she wish to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, the minister will definitely find a way of pursuing this, of coming back and correcting the record. Richard Turner, thanks so much for that super chat. Nadine Doris is AI, artificial at least. Oh yes, Nadine Doris, what a piece of work. You know, we have fraud is up 50%. You know, fraud is definitely up. I think that's something that the government can be proud of. That's something, you know, we're number one when it comes to fraud. You know, Lindsay inadvertently. Was it? What is it with that speaker? Yeah, it's getting a bit pathetic at this stage. I understand. Look, let me state something that's very important to remember. Look, his hands are tied. Okay, he can't force Boris Johnson back into the House of Commons, frog march him back to the dispatch box and correct the record. He can't do that. I understand that, but he has to do something. There must be something he can do. I think, you know, he can become angry. Can he not be angry? Like, he's angry if a minister talks to journalists before speaking to the House of Commons, which is wrong, okay, which is serious. But I think lying to Parliament, that's like, okay, in this case, the Parliament gets the access late after the media, and that should not happen. Parliament should hear it first. The MPs should be able to debate it, and then the media get it. I understand that's, you know, in this age it's difficult to do that. A lot of information is leaked beforehand, but ministers should not be giving press conferences before speaking to Parliament. They should speak to Parliament first. But in this case, you know, this is very serious. Boris Johnson lied, and as we know, as was it James O'Brien said, maybe it was not his quote, but he has repeated on a number of occasions. You know, a lie is halfway around the planet while the truth is getting its trousers on. Boris Johnson knows, and this is his tactic, lie and then allow somebody else to try and get the record corrected. Now, we only know about this because somebody actually called it out. But the chamber was pretty much empty. Look. Don't know if you'll be able to see it. How many Tories were there? 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know, is this guy a Tory? I don't know, this guy is probably working for the Parliament. So there were like 3 or 4 Tories there. Sorry, no, the Tories aren't on this side, sorry. There were very few Labour people out there. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong way. So there are a few Labour people here, but the Tory bench is pretty much empty. There should be more, although it's a point of order, so you're not going to call everyone back. But it's not going to really have any effect. Employment figures don't include self-employed. Lindsay Hoyle seems to have an inferiority complex when interacting with the posh public boys, school boys. Look like he's tugging on his forelock. Maybe. I hope that's not the case. Wrong side. Yeah, sorry. Apologies. I was pointing to the wrong side. The Tories are on this side, but it is pretty empty. But it's also quite empty on the Labour side. But perhaps that's because it's a point of order. It's not necessary. What are they going to do? But it is disappointing that, you know, nothing is going to happen from this because of this. Boris Johnson's not going to come back and correct the record. Boris Johnson has never corrected the record, as far as I know. The minister's not going to correct the record because it's pointless. There's no need. We have a majority. We don't have to correct the record. So it is a little bit sad, but it is good that somebody's calling it out. And this is the second MP to do that. The previous one was from Fife. Go Fife. So guys, we're almost at the end of the stream, so I want to say a massive thank you to everyone who came on tonight. Thanks for all of your super chats, greatly appreciated. Thanks to the moderator for doing a wonderful job as always. Remember, you can, if you're a patron, you've access. If you're a patron, sorry, you've access to Discord. I'll see you after the stream on Discord. We'll have a chat probably about what we talked about tonight. But before we finish, we have our one for the road. I hope you enjoy this, and then I'll see you all next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel. So enjoy.
Hello, I'm the smiley one who gave out loads of money during the pandemic and looks like I brushed my hair. I've got great graphic design and even better suits. Well, compared to the current Prime Minister, a half-drowned tramp would look better. Potential leader? Who said that? Stop it. Do you like this briefing room? It just says Downing Street, but I think we all know what number you're thinking of. Following the energy price cap increase, I know a lot of you are feeling anxious, like a special advisor who likes to post for photos at parties. Anyone who tells you there's an easy answer to this situation is not being straight with you. And if there's one thing I hate, it's people lying about important things. Not mentioning any names. On average, energy bills are going up by £690 this year, which is apparently a lot. I mean, how would I know? I'm a multi-millionaire and my wife is richer than the Queen. But never fear, electricity customers will be getting a discount of £200, which will then be repaid over the next 5 years. You know, like when you get a discount on your house and then repay that over the next 25 years. I love discounts. Yes, if you lived in France, you'd have a government that taxed energy companies to prevent price rises and then gave grants, not loans, discounts to the poorest people. But the thing is, since Brexit, you can't live in France. It's only fair that we all shoulder the burden of these price rises. They're caused by factors completely outside of my control, like our lack of gas storage facilities, our completely dysfunctional energy market in this country, and my total unwillingness to tax energy companies' profits. I mean, technically, yes, they're all under my control, but at least I never mentioned Jimmy Savile, so... No, I wouldn't have said what the Prime Minister said, but I'm glad that he clarified his statement, because that was the problem. The clarity. Look, energy prices may continue to rise. I don't have a crystal ball. I mean, I do have a diamond toothbrush and a golden sink, but I'm not sure that's relevant. Did you know that crime has actually fallen in the last few years? Yeah, unless you count fraud. And if you know anything about me, it's that I don't count fraud, unless it's benefit fraud, in which case you're going down. Sorry, keep smiling. Eyes on the prize. Can't be too long now. Soon you'll be able to replace that awful wallpaper. Keep smiling. Keep smiling.
Wonderful. Matt is great. So guys, remember, see you next Tuesday, same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great weekend. Keep safe. Keep yourself safe. Watch out for any ambushing of cakes, and I wish you all a great weekend. Take care. Good night.